Let's go to Ed in Brunswick. My eyesight's getting worse. Is that GA or CA? Ed, are you in Georgia or California?
Georgia.
Okay, Brunswick, Georgia. Great to have you with us.
Pleasure to talk to you, Mark. You know, I was listening to you on my way home just a few moments ago about Greece and about how everybody's going over the falls even without a barrel. And I started to think about what that really means to us. I mean, most Americans couldn't find Greece on a map, so much less picture what it would mean for the United States to follow Greece and the United Kingdom and Spain and Portugal over the falls. And I don't think many people are getting exposed to the reality of that. Can you dredge up a couple of examples of how that might work in this country?
Well, let's look at it. Let's look at it in basic terms, Ed. What is the main reason why Americans don't understand the scale of the crisis? And I would say, what's putting it off at the moment is that the dollar is the global reserve currency. The dollar is basically the world's currency. That's what makes the difference not just between America and Iceland, but between America and Zimbabwe.
Okay.
If you create the conditions before the dollar, the pound was the de facto world currency. These things come and go. The Chinese and the Saudis and other interested parties are already actively musing and publicly musing on a world after on the world after the dollar.
Yes, quite right. I just returned from China. I was there for 4 months.
Right.
And we have no concept. The United States people have no concept of what the Chinese are doing.
No.
And they're going to bury us. I'm old enough to remember when Khrushchev slammed his shoe on the desk at the United Nations and said, "We'll bury you." They're not going to do that. They're just going to quietly do it.
Yeah, and they've found, unlike Khrushchev, they've managed to come up with an economically viable form of communism, which is an extraordinary achievement.
Exactly correct. It's a mixture of capitalism and communism.
But I don't know whether you heard this when you were in China, but this is the way the Chinese big shots think. They think that a half millennium period of Western domination is ending, and that China is returning to natural ascendancy. And that's the way to think of it. Goldman Sachs says that China will be the biggest economic power on the planet by the year 2027.
They're learning English. In fact, that's exactly what I was doing, was teaching English to kids and adults in China. They're learning English.
Yeah, but you know, that's now.
Yeah.
Pitch it on 25 years, and they're going to be over here teaching Mandarin to English speakers.
Exactly correct. And this other thing about the budget thing, Mark. I mean, Obama's favorite trick was to blame Bush and the previous administrations for every sin that he could lay on them. Well, Congress was controlled, and the executive branch was controlled by the Democrats.
Right.
And they couldn't pass a budget or wouldn't pass a budget.
No.
And if anybody has any illusions about the Democratic Congress acting in the best interests of the United States, those illusions should be shattered right now, because they would not touch the budget issue before the elections in November.
No, so we're not talking no Republicans were harmed in the making of this budget crisis. It all came about when Democrats had total control of everything. They controlled the White House, they controlled the House, they controlled the Senate. It was Democrat. No Republicans were involved in the conversation. They had huge majorities. They could do exactly what they wanted. And the most basic function of government, passing a budget to enable the government to proceed, they weren't able to do it. This crisis is entirely of the Democrats' making. The Republicans weren't part of this conversation. And why is it, Ed? Why do you think, Ed, that they didn't go ahead and pass the budget?
Because they knew that they were in political trouble already, with the Tea Party rising up and people saying enough is enough.
Right.
And then to add the glaring cold hard light of day onto the budget situation and have it publicly debated in Congress would have been the absolute death knell to these people. And it should have been. And they knew it, and they wouldn't do it.
Right.
So now they're kicking the ball to the Republicans, with Chuck Schumer saying extreme, extreme, extreme like a puppet.
Yep.
That it's the Republicans' fault that the budget wasn't passed last year. Folks,
No.
Both houses of Congress were controlled by the Democrats last year, and they wouldn't touch it.
Right, right.
Their political future was more important to them than the welfare of this country.
No, and what's more extreme than basically the Democratic model of government, which is to spend $4 trillion, but only raise in revenue $2 trillion. That's extreme. That's beyond extreme. That's suicidal. And that's Chuck Schumer. The extremists here who think, are the ones who think you can go on running, trillion dollar plus deficits year in, year out, without consequence. Basically, the United States of America is now in the situation where it expects the rest of the world, to buy the equivalent of a G7 economy in federal treasury debt every single year. The United States Treasury, under the Chuck Schumer model, under the Harry Reid model, is issuing the equivalent of twice the economy of India in federal debt every year. That's extreme. That is not extreme, but it is actually wicked. It is evil. It is undermining the very foundations of this country. Ed, thank you for your call. If Republicans are stupid enough to get tagged by Chuck Schumer, the extremist, the extremist member of the extremist party that expects to be able to govern in perpetuity by spending $4 trillion a year and $2 trillion of which is buried, that's the extremist. And if the Republicans are stupid enough to get tagged with the blame for that, then more fool them.